At 2:47 p.m., a Ukrainian attack helicopter pulled off a move that broke every rule of combat aviation. It flew straight into the kill zone of a Russian missile team, low and slow, practically daring them to take the shot. The Russians couldn't believe their eyes. An Mi-24 Hind, packed with rockets, exposing itself in broad daylight over a quiet sector. It made zero tactical sense, unless the Ukrainians wanted them to fire. The helicopter's approach over this calm stretch of the front raises red flags. Alski has been a ghost town for months, with action mostly limited to drones and occasional artillery fire. Yet here's a prized Mi-24 gunship, loaded with 4 B-8V rocket pods, cruising into contested airspace at a dangerously low altitude. Each pod you see here carries 20 S-8 rockets, giving the chopper a total of 80 unguided projectiles. These 80mm rockets weigh 11.7 kilograms each, with a 1.1 kilograms warhead that can punch through 400mm of rolled homogeneous armor. But a helicopter loaded with this much firepower showing up here is like an NFL star crashing a kid's football game. It's absurd. At least, that's what the Russians think. And that's what counts. A Russian manpads team, holed up in a building about 3.2 kilometers away, has been tracking the chopper through binoculars for the last 4 minutes. The two-man crew operates a 9K-38 Igla surface-to-air missile system, one of Russia's deadliest portable air defense weapons. The system weighs 17.9 kilograms when armed, with its 1.5-meter-long missile packing a 1.17 kilograms warhead stuffed with 390 G of high explosive, more than enough to shred this helo into scrap. But the explosives aren't the pilot's biggest worry. It's this thing in the missile's nose. The 9M39 missile's cooled infrared seeker is a major upgrade over older models, using nitrogen cooling to cut sensor noise and boost detection range. This system can, in theory, distinguish between an aircraft's exhaust and basic flares. And here's where it gets wild. The pilot dives into an attack run, unleashing all 80 rockets in a brutal ripple-fire barrage. The rockets scream toward the ground at 610 meters per second, scattering across a 500-meter wide impact zone. But something's off about this attack. Many rockets splash harmlessly into the Dnepro River. Others slam into empty fields, kicking up geysers of mud and debris. Only a few hit actual structures. This looks like area suppression, not precision targeting, a wasteful use of ammo in a quiet sector. But this 500-meter spread serves a hidden purpose the Russians don't see. It doesn't just blanket the area, it creates the perfect setup to force an air defense response. Any manpads team watching this sloppy attack would feel compelled to take a shot at what looks like an easy target. The Russian team follows their training to the T. Soviet-era doctrine demands immediate engagement of any aircraft within the Igla's 5.2 kilometers range. The gunner double-checks his weapons specs one last time. The Igla can hit targets moving up to 800 meters per second at altitudes up to 3.5 kilometers. The Ukrainian chopper, flying low and slow during its attack run, is well within range. The gunner aims northeast, revealing a key detail. The helicopter has deliberately crossed into occupied territory. The Igla's 5.2 kilometers range can't even reach across the Dnepro from this position, meaning the Ukrainians are taking insane risks to bait the Russians into firing. What the Russian team doesn't stop to consider is why a Ukrainian chopper would expose itself so blatantly in broad daylight over a sector with known air defense coverage. The Alski area has little strategic value, minimal troop presence, and no critical infrastructure worth this kind of attack. The chopper's route even suggests it crossed the Dnepro River into occupied airspace, as the Igla's range doesn't extend across the water from the Russian position. This should set off alarm bells, but the tempting target overrides their judgment. It's about to be their downfall. The trap is set, and at exactly 2:48 p.m., as the last S-8 rockets hit below, the Russian operator pulls the trigger. The Igla's infrared seeker locks onto the Mi-24's engine exhaust, and the missile's solid-fuel rocket motor ignites with a bright white flash visible for miles. The missile races toward its target at Mach 1.9, its cooled seeker holding lock despite the afternoon sun. The Ukrainian pilot's SPO-15 Beryoza radar warning receiver instantly picks up the launch, though his reaction suggests he was ready for it. The SPO-15 operates across multiple frequency bands from 0.6 to 17 GHz, detecting emissions from hostile radars and missile seekers. Its 4 antennas provide 360 degrees coverage, calculating threat bearings with 15 degrees accuracy. Its threat library recognizes over 600 emission signatures, instantly identifying the weapon system. The SPO-15 doesn't just detect threats, it prioritizes them on a 16 LED display, showing bearing and threat level while playing specific audio tones for each threat type. A steady 800 Hz tone signals radar lock. A pulsing 1600 Hz warns of a missile launch, and rapid chirps indicate active terminal guidance. In this case, the high-pitched 1600 Hz pulse confirms an infrared missile launch, exactly what the pilot was waiting for. Banking hard left while deploying countermeasures, the Mi-24 releases a precise burst of 12 infrared flares in rapid succession. The chopper's UV-26 countermeasure system, mounted on the fuselage, holds 192 PPI-26 flares total. These flares burn at over 2000 degrees Celsius, creating infrared signatures designed to lure missiles away from the chopper's exhaust. The timing is flawless. In this moment, the battlefield turns into a thermal chaos zone. 80 exploding rockets below create a wall of heat signatures, while 12 fresh flares bloom like fake suns above. The missile seeker, built for a single target, suddenly faces dozens. It's like trying to spot one light bulb in Times Square at midnight. Impossible. Each S-8 rocket impact creates a lingering heat bloom, igniting vegetation, fuel, and anything flammable, generating dozens of infrared sources across the 500-meter zone. Combined with the flares at altitude, this creates a 3D maze of thermal confusion that no 1980s-era seeker can handle. The seeker's logic can't distinguish between signatures and loses lock on the chopper, latching onto the brightest heat source, a cluster of burning rocket impacts 150 meters away. The missile streaks past the Ukrainian helicopter, close enough for the crew to see, but too far to trigger the proximity fuse. This miss was always the plan. The real win comes next. By firing their missile, the Russian Manpads team just signed their own death warrant. The launch's infrared plume, visible to multiple sensors, pinpoints their exact position in the building. Ukrainian signals intelligence systems instantly triangulate the launch using the missile's heat signature and the team's comms emissions. The 90-second window for signals processing is a game-changer in battlefield awareness. In past conflicts, pinpointing a firing position could take 15 to 30 minutes. But Ukrainian forces have slashed this timeline with integrated sensors and streamlined comms. By the time those 90 seconds are up, the targeting data is already with the strike asset. In this case, it's sent to an FPV drone operator 8 km away. This marks a radical shift in helicopter tactics. Instead of dodging air defenses, Ukrainian pilots now deliberately draw fire. This accept the risk doctrine flips traditional helicopter tactics on their head. Rather than using terrain masking and standoff weapons to avoid defenses, Ukrainian pilots use their choppers as bait, relying on countermeasures and accepting potential losses to destroy enemy air defense networks. It's a bold gamble that traditional militaries would never teach, but it's proving brutally effective. The Mi-24 goes from potential prey to a predator that eats a glass for breakfast. Meanwhile, the Russian team starts their standard post-engagement routine, oblivious to the 8-minute countdown to their doom. Soviet doctrine calls for immediate relocation after firing to avoid counter-battery fire. In the Cold War, this shoot-and-scoot tactic worked, as enemy responses took tens of minutes or hours. But modern surveillance and networked operations have shrunk this timeline to single digits. The real genius of this operation is about to unfold. At 2:49 p.m., the FPV drone operator gets final target coordinates. The operator powers up a modified commercial quadcopter, its civilian shell hiding a military purpose. A 1.5 kilograms warhead, where a camera gimbal would normally be, blends consumer tech with military innovation. The drone takes off, heading for the Russian position at just 50 meters altitude to avoid radar and visual detection. The Russian Manpads team keeps packing up, focused on their gear instead of their surroundings. The 9K-38 Igla, while portable, requires several steps to stow after firing. The missile's launch tube must be detached from the grip stock. The expended battery coolant unit needs safe disposal to avoid chemical exposure. The thermal battery powering the seeker must be removed. Each part must be secured in its case for transport. This takes 4 to 6 minutes in perfect conditions, an eternity in modern warfare. But the muddy Dnepro River Delta terrain turns this into a slog. Summer rains have made the ground a sticky mess, clinging to boots and gear. The building that gave them cover and a firing platform now traps them, as they navigate debris and damaged stairs while hauling nearly 18 kilograms of equipment. This vulnerability window is a critical flaw Ukrainian forces spotted early in the conflict. During pack-up, crews can't dismantle complex weapons and stay alert at the same time. This 4 to 6 minute focus creates an opening drone operators are trained to exploit. Ukraine's decentralized operations enable this rapid response. Unlike traditional hierarchies where targeting data crawls up through battalion, brigade, and division for approval, Ukrainian forces operate with startup-like autonomy. The drone operator gets coordinates straight from signals intelligence and can act without a long approval chain. This flat structure, more Silicon Valley than Soviet Army, cuts decision cycles from 30 minutes to under 2. The choice of Alski was no accident either. On busier fronts, a Manpad's launch might get lost in the chaos. But in this quiet sector, any big move gets instant attention from intelligence assets. Ukrainian commanders picked this spot to maximize psychological impact. Every Russian air defense team on the radio would soon hear what happens when you shoot at Ukrainian choppers. At 2:54 p.m., 6 minutes after the failed missile shot, the Ukrainian drone nears the target. Through the first-person view feed, the operator sees 2 Russian soldiers still at their firing position, wrestling with their gear. The 17.9 kilograms Igla system, awkward even in good conditions, is a nightmare to move fast in mud. The drone's approach is built for success and stealth. At 50 meters altitude, it's below most radar detection thresholds. Its small size and plastic build give a tiny radar cross-section. Electric motors produce almost no heat, unlike fuel-powered drones or aircraft. More crucially, they make a high-pitched whine only audible within 100 to 200 meters. By the time you hear it, it's too late. This near-silent approach until the final seconds leaves no time for reaction or cover. The Russians stay focused on their task, unaware their time is down to seconds. Ukraine's distributed ops make this possible. Instead of centralized command needing multiple approvals, the drone operator gets targeting data direct from intel nodes. This flat structure lets them exploit the narrow vulnerability window. Through the FPV camera, the operator makes final tweaks for perfect placement. The 1.5 kilograms warhead, small by military standards, is plenty against personnel and gear in the open. The drone dives from its cruising altitude to maximize impact. At 2:55 p.m., 7 minutes after the Igla launch, the Russians finally notice the threat. The unmistakable whine of drone rotors, seared into every soldier's memory after months of combat, triggers instant recognition. But in the tight space near the building, lugging heavy gear through mud, there's no escape. They can only watch as the drone closes in. The operator keeps lock through the camera, making final adjustments to land the warhead right between the 2 soldiers and their gear. The drone's path is dead on. Its mission clear. 8 minutes ago, these guys fired at a Ukrainian chopper. Now, they're in the find-out phase of their villain arc. At exactly 2:56 p.m., 8 minutes after the Igla launch, the drone hits. The 1.5 kilograms warhead detonates on impact. The blast ensures 1 fewer Igla threatening Ukrainian aircraft. Within hours, Russian comms traffic lights up with chatter among air defense units. Manpads teams across the sector get new orders: don't engage unless explicitly told to. This hesitation, born from fear of instant retaliation, cripples the entire network's effectiveness. Ukrainian choppers now fly with more freedom, knowing Russian operators must weigh survival against orders. Catch you later.